came here to see today. Lieutenant Governor Delgado held more than 65 in-person town halls when he served in Congress. Unlike Stefanik, who hasn't had one here in, I don't know, I think we couldn't even figure it out, actually. How long? 6 years. At least thank you for verifying that. And Lieutenant Governor Delgado continues to hold town halls like this, okay? And he's here today. He was born and raised in Schenectady. He's the son of a working-class parents who taught him the value of hard work and perseverance. A Colgate graduate, Rhodes Scholar, and Harvard Law alum, Antonio has dedicated his life to leading with love and working to improve the lives around him. Before entering politics, he was a lawyer, and this kills me, a hip-hop artist. I think he should perform for us tonight. Anna, you've got most rural districts in the country, where he built a reputation for bipartisanship and results, passing legislation to uplift all communities. Appointed Lieutenant Governor in 2022 and elected to a full term in November of 2022, Antonio has been traveling across New York to listen, lead, and fight every day for New Yorkers, whether it's in the city or up here in the Adirondacks. He lives in Rhinebeck with his wife, Lacey, their twin sons, and their dog, Leroy. Everyone please give a warm welcome to Lieutenant Governor Antonio Delgado.
Good afternoon. I think in today's environment is needed now more than ever. I want to thank show up all of the organizations that are on the front lines every single day, doing the heavy lifting of moral agency, which, as I said to a group earlier today, is bigger than left-right politics and boils down to right versus wrong. I start from this place of being a father of 11-year-old, 12. They just turned 12. I'm so used to saying they're 11. They just had their birthday, August 22nd. But the father of twin identical boys. And I've gotten to watch them sort of try to navigate life in politics with me, where they are witnessing and have a front row seat to leadership and the kinds of leaders that are out there, and has pained me at various moments throughout the course of my time in public service to try to help them understand that just because somebody has a title and is viewed as a leader doesn't make them a good person. Doesn't mean they're going to be honest, doesn't mean they're going to be decent or have integrity or just be the kind of person that you want to spend time with. Now, why do I share all that? Because I don't think we get out of this situation without moral leadership. I don't believe it. And I genuinely mean that. I do not believe that politicians are the answer in this moment. I believe public servants are the answer. But if you really want to be a public servant, you have to be willing to give something up. You have to have skin in the game. You cannot play politics for the purpose of holding on to power. You cannot play politics for the purpose of self-preservation or survival. You've got to be willing to sacrifice your own power for the greater good and do whatever is required. It's the only way. It's the only way to beat back what I would call an immoral force. So that's why when I got this amazing invitation to come to Plattsburgh and do an empty chair town hall to highlight what I would argue is the moral bankruptcy of my former colleague, Stefanik, I was excited to jump at the opportunity. Not to disparage, per se, but to put a light on what's missing, what's not present, what's unaccounted for. I served with Stefanik. When I was elected in 2018, my district was the 8th most rural congressional seat in the country. 11 counties, bigger than Connecticut and Rhode Island combined. So we had, I think 4 different regions: the Hudson Valley, the Catskills, the Southern Tier, the Mohawk Valley, the Capital Region, Delaware County, Sullivan County, Montgomery, Schoharie, Rensselaer, all over the place. 90% white. No Democrat had ever won the district, ever. And Trump had won the seat by 7 points just 2 years prior. So a lot of folks thought that someone that looked like me with a hip-hop album wasn't going to have a chance. I didn't grow up on a farm. I had 5,000 small family-owned farmers in my district. I had to learn very early on what it meant to represent, to serve our farmers, and I did. I traveled the district during the course of the campaign. But once I was elected, I was very, very, very keen on doing town halls. And I made sure that we did at least 3 town halls in all 11 counties within the very first year I was in Congress, so 33 in year 1. And I was very keen on my team making sure that we did these town halls in communities and in neighborhoods that I knew did not support me. I said, do not put me places where I was supported. I want to go into those communities that I have to prove myself, that I have to put some skin in the game and demonstrate that I'm prepared to be vulnerable, to open up myself to scrutiny, ridicule, whatever the case might be, because the position is bigger than me. It is the people's position, no matter what their party affiliation, no matter what, if they supported me or didn't. That is the point. And we've become so partisan, culturally speaking, in the way in which our so-called leaders leverage these dynamics, that I think sometimes we lose sight. And leaders are the ones who have to correct the imbalance, not just fan the flames. We got a lot of folks out there who want to fan the flames because it allows them to hold on to power, to maintain it for their own purposes, oftentimes at the expense of the very people who gave them the power in the first place. This is a problem. It's a big problem. And you know who it hurts, I've come to appreciate? It hurts a lot of communities that are already economically struggling. It compounds economic insecurity. It compounds food insecurity. It compounds a broken healthcare system. It compounds a world where people cannot find affordable housing or child care. It compounds it because we don't solve for the problems. We're too busy playing this power game where everybody's leveraging where they fit within their respective party to hold on to it at the very expense of solving for the problems that people are putting us here to fix. I think, just so you know a little bit more about me and why maybe I struggle with this in ways that probably you do, more so than my colleagues. I was a complete outsider to politics. I never ran for anything, literally. I was a student of politics. I certainly studied it. I had some activism in me. I engaged in some activism when I was on college campuses back at Colgate. I did all that. But I never ran for anything. Never on student government. Never had to deal with partisan politics or the party machinery or any of that. So when Trump won in 2016, at that point I had been a lawyer in the corporate side. And I've been a lawyer for about 6-7 years. I was actually 1 year out from making partner. Not sure I want that path. In fact, I knew I didn't want that path, but I didn't know exactly what else to do at that point. And before that, as noted, yes, I spent 5 years as a struggling hip-hop artist. This is after law school, so my parents were a little surprised. But the hip-hop time was more about speaking truth to power and leveraging and following my passion and doing what I thought was right and leaving money on the table, because I've always believed, as I was raised, to do whatever you believe your purpose is. That's how you live your fullest sense of self. And when Trump won, he sort of, like a lot of folks I imagine, made me reevaluate what the hell I was doing with my own life and if I was making the most of it. And with that, I walked away from the firm, moved back home to upstate in the Hudson Valley with my wife, both of us from the area, from Schenectady, she's from Woodstock, and got busy doing the work of trying to make our place, our communities better. And I've always, I think, as a result of that, had an outsider-insider mentality, because I did not make my way up through the party machinery. I didn't go through any gatekeepers or party bosses. I just said I want to run for Congress. I skipped over local, state, all of that, and just ran. And by the good grace of God and the people of New York 19, I was able to become a member of Congress. And I think I've never lost sight of the fact that this was not something that's meant to just be a career. It ought to be a calling. It ought to be something that compels you to serve. So when I look at someone like Stefanik, going back to my early days as a member of Congress, I remember on my very first trip to D.C., as a member of Congress, I'm flying out of Albany. I take a seat. I look to my left. Who do I see? Stefanik, right next to me. Now, this is before the change. You see, this is what I want to give you some visibility into. This is before the shift, before the calculations and the triangulation and the desire to want to keep and hold on to power at the expense of the people. I saw her. I sat down with her. I spoke with her about her family and her future and all of this before the shift happened. And who I spoke to in that moment, or who I saw in that moment, was a very different person than now. Now, maybe she was the same person, I don't know at heart, but whoever she was being then is different than who she's choosing to be now. That's the facts. And put politics aside for a second. Why would we be comfortable with anybody on a human level that is two-faced, that can be one way one moment and fundamentally different the next moment? It's just a moral question. It's just a moral question, especially when that individual is meant to represent you, to be a reflection of you. Are you doing that? Are you flip-flopping? No, the reality is, as power shifts, as power dynamics change, people inside of politics make decisions to hold on to their power and do whatever they think is going to benefit them to keep that power at the very expense of the people, if not their very soul. So when I look at Stefanik, I say to myself, there's a lesson. There's a lesson in where we are right now, in the absence of moral leadership. And we, the people, the folks here today, all of you out there understand, the bar has to be set higher. And you have to demand more and expect more. And I'm here in part to define for you as well, in partnership, where that bar needs to be set. Because we are living in a time right now where, whether I see Republicans or, candidly, Democrats, too many people inside of politics are concerned about keeping power at the expense of the people. And we have too much harm coming our way because of the big, ugly bill that is a moral abomination. And I believe Stefanik is proud, I guess, to be the deciding vote on that last time I checked. A bill that guts health care, guts Medicaid, guts SNAP, and scapegoats our immigrant community along the way. That classic divide and conquer strategy that happens far too often. I've been around this state enough times to know, irrespective of your race, your immigration status, your gender, your sexual orientation, a lot of people are catching economic hell. And we'd be wise to figure out how to connect all that pain together to fight against a system that has been overwhelmed by corporate power, to fight back against a system that has been corrupted by way too much money in politics, a system overwhelmed by special interests and lobbying groups that strangle the very vitality out of our democracy. There's a reason why Trump increased the funding for ICE at the same time he stripped away funding for the social safety net program. They go hand in hand. We put pain on the poor people, we hurt them, and we scapegoat others to distract them. This is nothing new. It's happened for many, many years, going back centuries. We've reached a point where it's on us to figure out how long we're going to keep falling for it. I feel fortunate because my time in elected office have put me in a position where I can connect the pain. Because I have talked to those small family-owned farmers who feel like they're being squeezed out by big ag, don't know how their milk prices are being set, can't figure out a way to connect with the economy of today. I've talked to those Starbucks workers out in Buffalo or downstate who are tired of having to sign a non-compete clause to sell coffee. What are we doing? Or the Teamster truck driver that can't take a pee break because Amazon will dock him or her. We got to be able to connect all of this pain that is happening everywhere, be it upstate, downstate, rural, urban, white, black, brown. It doesn't matter at this point. A lot of folks are hurting. And I am tired of too many elected officials who could talk a good game, but aren't willing to do the heavy lifting to put themselves in a tough spot. Now, I want to have a conversation in a dialogue, so I'm going to wrap this up because I can go on and on. But I want to talk to you about whatever is on your mind, and I want to hear directly from all of you. But let me just say this. 1 second, JJ. I see you about to get up. Just 1 second. I have solutions. I want to be clear. Whether it's on housing, whether it's on health care, whether it's on wages, whether it's on addressing economic inequality, whether it's on child care, whether it's on our climate, energy prices, I'm happy to speak to any of these issues, and hopefully we can get to some of these issues. But to help you understand just the framing of it all, as you try to figure out where I fall in the political landscape of things, I'll say this: the status quo is broken. We have a state that is governed by Democrats. And we have a state that has the largest wealth inequality gap of any state. A state governed by Democrats. 1 in 5 of our children are growing up poor, and half of those kids are in deep poverty. Come on. A state where people are going bankrupt paying their health care bills, and nobody statewide is talking about universal health care system that drives the profit out of our health care system. We have a state that's allowing the corporate tax rate, which is already lower than 19 other states, including our neighboring states, to sunset. While we're getting cuts for the ultra-wealthy and big corporations at the federal government, and we got leaders who want to call that out and say shame, but don't have the political courage or moral courage right here in our backyard to say, let's tax big corporations and the ultra-wealthy. That's hypocritical. I'm tired of people calling themselves for the people if they're not really for the people. Show us you're for the people. Before that big ugly bill got passed, you heard a lot of folks say, a lot of my fellow Democrats say, call your congressperson, stop it, call your congressperson, telling you what you should do. And a lot of you did it. Then the bill passes. What happens? Nothing. No action on our end. What happened to maybe a special session, bringing folks back to Albany to figure out how to mitigate the economic harm that we know is going to happen? Or how about passing legislation to protect our immigrant community like New York for all? How about taking actual, concrete, tangible steps in the immediate aftermath to show the New Yorkers we give a damn and we mean what we say? And it's not political theater. It's not performance. It's actually real. You see the difference, I'm going to tell you right now, and this might come up in the questions, oh, why are you doing this? Why are you doing that? None of what I'm doing is about some long game. The process matters to me more than the outcome. Understand that. JJ was talking about being able to go through a process, being able to have an open, transparent, accountable conversation with the people in our democracy, in a free society. How hypocritical is it to try to, again, blame Trump for all of his shortcomings? He's got a lot of them. But be very comfortable mirroring a lot of the same anti-democratic tendencies. This is the reality that we have to contend with, and this is where the argument goes beyond politics and becomes about morality. And democracy does not work without moral leadership. It is built on a moral idea. So, I'm gonna wrap it up. But I'm very grateful for the opportunity to engage with all of you, to answer your questions, and just know that we have an opportunity here in New York and across this country to really elevate our expectations on what leadership should be in this moment. It's not going to be easy. We got a lot of hard work ahead of us and more challenging times. But my faith rests in the fact that there have been more challenging times than now that we've been able to overcome, and history has taught us that. So we lean on our history and lean on the fact that we have done this and been here before, and we can do it again. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to come to whoever has questions for the Lieutenant Governor. And I will try not to trip. Oh,
I can hear you.
Hi, Jeff. If I knew it was you, I wouldn't.
Yes. I support it.
I want to know from you, what have you done in these years
So, the great question. There's a couple points I'll make on that. One is on the question of why it's been a struggle. It's been a struggle because of entrenched interests. I mean, fossil fuel industry, natural gas, and you got to factor in the monopolies that set the pricing, the utility companies that are statutorily given a rate of return, right? They have to get a rate of return, but nothing says that that rate of return needs to be untethered to anything. It's just, they can basically at this point, because of the lack of accountability, we just saw this with the PSC's decision to allow more rates to be driven up without any accountability, and we saw elected officials, including the governor, bemoan it and say that's a horrible outcome, lip service, because in the end, there are steps that can be taken, whether it is passing the HEAT Act, which would cap, or whether it's also, which I'm an advocate of, having an authority other than the PSC oversee the manner in which these rates get set, or working with legislative body to tie that rate of return to a standard that isn't driven by pure profit making. These are all the different kinds of options that are out there that year after year after year, as you talk about, are being overlooked. And what's even worse is that they're being leveraged as a result to say, oh, your energy costs are going up because of this transition that we're making to green energy. No, the energy costs are going up because we're being gouged, and then the money is being used to be invested in outdated, outmoded fossil fuel pipelines, which actually add more to the cost. That's how twisted the narrative is. Think about that. And then you get folks like our governor and others who will parrot that narrative and say, well, we gotta consider all of our options because the cost is so high. But why is the cost so high? And it's not because we have some of the boldest climate laws in the country. That's not the reason. It's because the folks who are mad at the fact that we have the boldest climate laws in the country are trying to sabotage that reality every step of the way. So you say, okay, great, that understood. So what the hell, why can't we, what have I been doing, what have others been doing? Well, I mean, I think, to be candid, that's why I'm running to be a governor, because I had a front row seat, and it's not just on issues, it's a number of issues where there's an acceptance of the status quo, there's an acceptance of certain power players, there's an acceptance of certain entrenched interests that dictate. And listen, I'm the lieutenant governor. I'm not in every single room. I'm not a part of every conversation. A lot of times things are decided that are beyond my purview, but what I can tell you is there's a pattern in practice that continues to happen where certain entrenched interests, whether it's in the housing space with developers, whether it's in the healthcare space with hospitals, whether it's in the climate space with fossil fuel subsidies, you go down the line, in every instance, there's a natural bias that tends to favor certain industries and the titans of these industries, oftentimes at the expense of working people, everyday New Yorkers. So we have to have leadership willing to take on that entrenched power. And it has to have a bully pulpit. It has to be in a position to actually leverage it to the fullest extent possible. Otherwise, it's going to get steamrolled.
Okay. Oh, we got a couple over here. Get to you next.
Hi, my name is Ellen Bieberman, and I live in Franklin County. And as you know, we have a lot of prisons up there.
Yes.
And we just had the big strike and the whole mess about that. And I'm not asking a leading question. I don't want to go over that. I want to know what you think can be done in the future. Conditions are bad. both for the prisoners and for the COs? And do you have any thoughts about what can be done to avoid what happened?
Well, it's a great question, and it's an important question. And, you know, one of the things that I've tried to do, and I think this is a byproduct of my time in public service. Again, when I was in Congress, 2/3 of my congressional seat did not share my party affiliations. A third independent, a third Democrat, a third Republican. So I oftentimes found myself in the company of folks where you have to first, before anything, just listen and understand like where people are coming from. It's the only way to really understand how to serve them. And when I think about issues that oftentimes that are fraught sometimes with controversy or have been overly politicized or are scapegoated or become political footballs, you know, it takes, I think, a willingness to first and foremost try to listen to everybody in the conversation to better understand how to lead us out of it. Process has to matter, and how open and how transparent and how accountable one is throughout that process is critically important. I think about, and I've been inside of a number of our prisons. I've talked to correction officers repeatedly, extensively. I've talked to our incarcerated individuals. I serve on the, or did serve on the Council of Community Justice, where we, you know, went inside, you know, a number of state prisons and held roundtable conversations. And so I've been able to hear from folks, and during the strike, which was illegal, right? But I did think it was important to sit down and meet with a number of the folks who were picketing and striking, and hear them out and get a better understanding of what those dynamics were. And there's no doubt that both for our COs and for our incarcerated individuals, the conditions behind those walls are not safe. They're not safe, they're inhumane, and then the working conditions, the mandatory overtime, and things of that nature with understaffing, all of that is a grueling environment. And it is incumbent upon us to do everything we can to protect everybody inside those walls and have open dialogue about how we're not meeting that. And the one thing that I think I would want to do, which I don't think we're doing enough of, is not let every crisis moment happen, like we saw, and have a reaction to that as the entry point to a larger conversation. So when we see the god-awful murder, Robert Brooks, and it is, you know, just heartbreaking and deeply, profoundly offensive on so many levels, that shouldn't be the entry point to a larger conversation. We should already be having conversations about the conditions inside of our facilities. Because once that becomes the entry point, well then people pick sides. It becomes a different dynamic of what we're really trying to deal with here. And I think the role of leadership, be it the governor or our commissioners, is to bring accountability on a more regular basis. Show up to the facilities unannounced. Bring accountability into those spaces so that folks know, whether they're COs or whether they're the folks, the incarcerated individuals, they understand that at any moment, accountability can be brought to bear. So that people understand not to, you know, operate from a place of fear, but from a place of respect and accountability, and say we are prioritizing what's going on behind these walls. We are prioritizing this in a way that assures you have our attention. And I think what I have witnessed when I talk, again, to COs and to folks who are serving time is that lack of attention, that lack of accountability consistently allows these dynamics to fester over time and spill over in ways that become national or statewide news, and then the conversation gets swallowed up in that moment, as opposed to understanding the systemic institutional realities that persist year in and year out but go unaccounted for. We have to be willing to do that work.
Great answer. Here.
Hi. So my name is Walker Allen. I'm a student at SUNY Plattsburgh, and I've lived here my entire life. And I just wanted to know, what is it that you would do to support lower level progressive candidates and also progressive causes in general in New York?
Well, let me say a couple of things about the labels that we choose to use, and progressive versus, corporatists versus centrists versus moderate. Here's what I'm going to say. First and foremost, there's a fundamental imbalance in our political system that gives way too much credence to corporate power and way too little credence to people, community-based power. Now, you can call that a progressive mindset. I don't care what you call it. What I call it is not right. Something is wrong when we have a system where there's a concentrated few that dictates the outcomes of everybody else. And our political system has been taken over by money and wealth and economic power, such that it stopped looking like a democracy at this point. And what I'm afraid of, and I'm gonna get to your question, is when you look at our party, right, the Democratic Party, and I think, JJ, you might have mentioned this, and it's funny, I say a version of it. We are, at this point, Republican light. That's what we really are, economically speaking. We have a governor, like I've said, who's unwilling, it's a non-starter to even talk about raising taxes on the ultra-wealthy or big corporations. That's our governor, our Democrat, non-starter, okay? We have a system here in New York that says we're gonna give away $11 billion a year in tax credits to select businesses under the umbrella of economic development, but yet we know every time we do that, we don't get a return on that investment. No job creation, and if anything, folks are priced out of their community. So why don't we take those same tax dollars and subsidies and directly invest them in our communities and break the cycles of poverty? How about that? But the same thing manifests within our party state infrastructure, okay? A lot of our leaders, including the head of the state party, Jay Jacobs, okay? These individuals are operating from a place of a mentality where power lies in how much money can you raise. Your viability as a candidate, how much money can you raise? Your credibility as a candidate, who do you know that can raise you money for your campaign? Everything is driven by money. That is anti-progressive. That is anti-people and community, because you are literally filtering out not just candidates, but the people who can support these candidates in a real robust way through field and postcard writing and phone banking. You're making people see politics through a lens that is about money as opposed to a movement of the people. And I would do a complete overhaul of the entire Democratic State Party. From the top all the way down. And I want to be clear about something. If I'm so fortunate enough to be the governor, I won't view the Democratic Party as my playground, the state party as my playground. That is a flawed understanding of how power ought to work. We can be partners. We can try to collaborate and build together, but to hold money over Dem county chairs' heads and say, if you don't do this, you don't get that, or define your value based on how much money you can raise or the county can raise, as opposed to building a robust, statewide, field-oriented, community-based operation that runs year-round, that engages our young people in a meaningful way, and our college campuses in a meaningful way. That is the model that is self-sustaining and actually can build change on. Not this corporatist, top-down, you only matter if you can write a check model. And I'll only make you matter based on the money that I have as chair of the party. None of that makes sense. And all of it is not all that different than what we get mad at for what the other side does. So when I hear people say we shouldn't draw moral equivalencies, well, yeah, to a point. To a point. Because the reality is we are making it very hard for our more left-leaning, our more progressive, our more people-powered, our more community-oriented types of candidates and leaders to step into the fold. I don't care, well, let me just say this, and then I'll move on. But I'll just say this. I'm encouraged, though. We don't have to agree on every single policy when it comes to the Democratic nominee, Mayor Mamdani. I'm not calling mayor, but the candidate, Mamdani. But I find it really, really revealing that the Democratic candidate won in a primary. He's the Democratic nominee, and we have parties for a reason, I thought, to decide on candidates in part and then rally around those candidates that are our nominees. But for some reason, we've chosen, a lot of our leaders in New York have chosen, well, not this time. What does that signal to all the Democrats that did support him? All the young people that came out and supported him. All the first-time voters that were inspired by a candidate that looked and felt and sounded different than the classic establishment, cookie-cutter Democratic candidate. So in case you're wondering, I endorsed it within 24 hours. Okay? But it just signals to me the lack of, one, political courage, because I know the argument, oh, I don't want to be called a socialist. Or, oh, you know, I think the governor said she's going to be a therapist in chief for all the billionaires who are concerned. Like, at a certain point, who's your constituency? And how do you, not only that, build a broad coalition? That's the key. How do you build power? How do you grow power? That's the goal. And so when you have somebody breaking through that has new kinds of constituents that are willing to be a part of a larger coalition to push back a morally repugnant force, why would we ever choose to pick sides with that? We need everybody on board. We need everybody to fight.
Can I just say amen to that real quick? Okay.
Hi, just to follow up on that, we have special elections. We're going to have a special election for New York 21. That got canceled. But now we have another upcoming special election for Assembly 115. And I think the laws need to be changed because technology has changed. I think we could pull together a primary quicker so that people could have the actual right to vote. Like Mamdani, our votes don't matter. And that's what it seems like with these special elections, the way that they're set up. So I didn't know if there's a way to be able to change these special elections to allow more community voting, to let it up to the people rather than a few of the top Democrats.
Well, I think that's a great question. And I think a lot of these things, you know, depend on, you know, the Constitution, our state constitution, all the dimensions around that, and sort of all the different ways that we have to account for the legalities of things. So I don't want to speak out of turn or out of pocket in terms of saying what can and cannot be done. I do think that there needs to be serious consideration of anything that can further democratize our electoral process, right? Anything that pushes the envelope in a way. And again, listen, I think you bring up special elections. I brought up special sessions. Just throw in redistricting too in this conversation, because I think what I want to underscore is the fierce urgency of now. Now. So whatever we can do now, right? A lot of things require time to change. And I'm not saying we shouldn't do them because they require time to change. But I think in the order of operation, we should be thinking about what we can do now. And so when I hear folks talk about redrawing lines, for example, for 2028 elections, okay, that's 2028. What can we do now? Right? Like, what is it that we're in a position? Where does our power lie now? Well, one of those is a special session, right? And maybe over the course of that special session, we can address any number of issues, again, from taxes to protecting our immigrant community to our election laws. All of it can be thrown in the pot, but do something that people can feel the effect of now. And I think to your question, I think anything we can do to really bring more and more people into the process and not have that top-down approach, I think is vitally important. I'm all about investing in direct people power as opposed to some hierarchy that ultimately divorces people. Listen, maybe y'all don't know this about me, but I'll share it as well. During the 2024 election, you know, speaking to your point about top-down and how choices get made, I said Biden needed to step down. And a lot of people who I know I serve with felt the same way, believed the same thing. But because of the top-down nature of our party system and everybody rallying around who they think is owed something as opposed to what the people are owed, and I love Biden, by the way, loved him, still love him. But it's not about that. It's about what's right for the people. I believe that. And so because I believed it, I made a point to say it so that people understood where I stood. And it came with political blowback, of course. It came with a very top-down dynamic. But at the end of the day, I believe because we as a party failed to find the courage from the top down to do that sooner, we got Trump. And that, for me, is a very, very hard pill to swallow. Really heartbreaking pill. Because it means we didn't have to put ourselves in this position, but because of party power dynamics. And that's a hard thing to say out loud and to hear, but I think it's the truth from where I sit. And if we can't take our lessons from that and figure out what it means moving forward, then shame on us. We've got to be willing to deal with the hard truths. And that does mean not letting everything come from the top down.
So we've got time for like a couple more questions here. I know a lot of you
Get
do.
some fun and some folks in the back over there. We can go.
You want to go back there?
Let's make sure we spread it out. You know.
Okay, you're making me run.
Hi. Thanks for coming to Plattsburgh.
Happy to be here.
The question I have for you is really about real politics because you're asking us to make you governor. And we see what's happening in Washington. We see what's happening in Chicago, where our own military is being deployed against our people who are exercising their rights. When you're governor, and this happens in New York, when this happens in Albany, when this happens in Boston, the troops are here to hurt us, what are you going to do?
So thank you. That's the right question. You know, I think that what we're going through right now is a slow-moving a slow-moving attempt to literally just take over our entire government system. And well, it's slow in the sense of he's normalizing things so that we get used to it. You know, when you allow over time people to snatch people up with mass federal agents, and that kind of just becomes normalized over time, and you deploy National Guard troops in this city over here for crime, in this city over here for immigration enforcement, and you start off in you know, blue cities with a lot of black and brown bodies to make it seem like it's not what it is. I think we have some examples that we saw in California, which, you know, I thought the limitations of what Trump could really do with a serious resistance that was caught up in the legalities in the courts, where they made it clear that, you know, and Trump, as hard as he wanted to, was limited on the manner in which those troops could be used to protect ICE agents. And I'm not saying that is a great outcome, but it is one that demonstrates that there are real limits when you have a governor who is willing to go toe-to-toe and resist and not negotiate at all. You know, this is why I struggle when I read things or hear things about attempts to work out deals with him. You know, there's reporting that the governor, since you brought it, you know, I'll be candid with you. The governor is trading windmills for pipelines and, you know, trying to cut deals with him to deal with energy costs, and like as if he's a normal good faith actor. Like as if he's got a proven track record for keeping agreements. As if he's like a credible negotiator. Like, he's not. He's not. And so there has to be a way in which you decide what the mission is, what the goal is, what the objective is to protect New Yorkers. What the objective is to defend our state sovereignty. That's the objective. And the good thing about New York, which I think is important not just for New Yorkers, but for the country and for the world over, by the way, is New Yorkers and everybody else around the country and the world is looking at us. What's New York gonna do? How's New York gonna act with the third largest economy in the country, the 9th largest economy of any country if we were an independent nation, the financial capital of the world, the place where immigrants the world over come to? What is New York gonna do? We have the wherewithal, we have the resources, we have everything we need to do to fight. What we need is moral courage. That's what we need. So you can count on me to be holed up with every single senior person in law enforcement, every person in our court system, all the elected officials, figuring out exactly point for point, timetable for timetable, what we can do, how aggressive can we be, what is the manner of the resistance, what are the clear lines that will not be crossed, and make sure that every single step of the way we protect. But again, I hate to say this, but there are things that we could be doing right now that could at least begin to create some buffer zones and at least signal to New Yorkers we're here to fight. Right? Like again, you do a special session, you pass legislation to protect our immigrant community, our brothers, our sisters, our neighbors. They know, and everybody in New York knows, oh, okay, we're here to fight. Yeah. You want to say I'm soft on quote-unquote illegals? Okay, say that. I was going to say another word. Say that nonsense, if you like. Say it. Play that typical political game that you like to play. We're playing a higher, matter of fact, it's not a game. It's just called morality. And we're going to stand on it, and we're going to fight for everybody in our state. So yeah, I'm ready to fight.
All right, we have time for one more question. I'll let Lieutenant Governor choose.
Well, let's do two, because I see this
Okay.
woman here and then the guy behind, and we can.
All right. I'll come over there. Oh, we can hear you.
Thank you, Mary. Yeah. So, I mean, listen, I think your question, and this ties to the previous question, there are dimensions to this. I think your specific point about withholding, I think that there are steps that we can take that are going to require more people to do things, and not just say, can we just call upon our elected officials to pass this or to do something that might be unconstitutional. Like, we actually need people like yourself prepared to mobilize. This reminds me in some respects of what was required, although I wasn't alive, but just thinking about it, all the people that were a part of the civil rights movement during the 60s, who weren't elected officials, who figured out ways through civil disobedience and mobilization and mass organizations. That was the effort that it took when you were trying to break through a system that was being leveraged at your expense, a legal system that was being leveraged at your expense. I worry, and I think leadership matters in this moment, that we've lost a little bit of that capacity as a collective body, that we are too siloed, that we are too much in our echo chambers. And we've got to culturally break through, and I think leaders have to be willing to help galvanize that effort and that energy, and not just political. I'm talking ministers, I'm talking rabbis, I'm talking, labor leaders, I'm talking anybody who's out there who cares about the future of this country and the state, figures out how to mobilize their constituencies for the betterment of all, and does things that might be nonviolent, of course, but yet disruptive. That's to me. That to me is where my head goes when I think about where this might take us. Because at the end of the day, what I've come to appreciate about our system of government and democracy altogether is that it only works because we believe in it. It's not some self-sustaining thing. It's just like money. Everybody wakes up one day and said, money doesn't mean anything, money doesn't matter, right? But we get so embedded with these ideas that we just actually believe that there's some inherent value in these things. No, we give things value. We are the ones that make things valuable. And so the moment we start checking out of democracy or not really putting the value in it by doing the work that is required, by fighting for it, then it loses its sustainability. And so I think you're right, 2026 is going to be the first national moment where we'll see, well before 2026, a ramping up of all the different things that are happening across this country, and certainly a consolidation of that power in our nation's capital to frustrate the manner in which elections are being held, voters are being suppressed, and or outcomes are being manipulated. And we've got to be prepared for that mentally, spiritually, physically. Like, there is no, I'm not here to sugarcoat that, but I also am not here to act like there's an easy panacea or a cure-all that can just make it all stop. that's not how life works. Like, we have to be willing to go through it and fight through it and mobilize and put ourselves in the best positions to elevate this. And I'll just say the other point on that, and it's instructive. You know, I served with the late, great John Lewis, and I got to march across the Edmund Pettus Bridge with him. And he, right, this is about a year or two before we lost him, with the, Bloody Sunday happened. And the power of Bloody Sunday wasn't just what happened on that bridge. The power of Bloody Sunday was that it was televised, and that folks all across the country bear witness to what was happening in the South. And it elevated the collective consciousness of the people, and it drove more people to the movement as a result. And that led to the passage of the Civil Rights Act, 65. You see, so that small group got elevated and then led to change. We have to be willing, and this is the power of our time. We have social media. We have all these vehicles to elevate different moments of accountability. And if we trust in our history and trust in the tactics, the methods of nonviolence, we could find ourselves in a position where we have to leverage modern day technology, modern day mobilization, but do so in a way that activates our collective sense of responsibility for each other, and not have this collective indifference, which I think is really what's at stake right now.
You wanted one more, right?
One more.
Okay. You want to talk in the mic so that the live stream.
So I kind of have two questions.
Two.
Kind of. What do you think is something that we can all be doing, forms of civil disobedience and such? And then for the state level, do you think there's any validity and viability to the proposal that New York State withhold funding from the federal government, given the federal government's current threat to withhold funding from New York State?
Yeah, so that second question I attempted to answer in my last question. I'm a little, I find that I understand the line of question. I understand the reasoning behind it. I understand the rationale. But the point I was trying to make in my last answer was, in my opinion, there are more direct and immediate and collective modes of action that I would be more apt to want to do before jumping to that level, because that one is going to get caught up in the courts. It's going to get caught up in legalities, and then it becomes a legal thing. And I'm not saying, it just takes it's almost like, and I hate to say this, but I don't want the people, amongst, and I'm with you, I don't want the people to let process get in the way of their agency. Embrace your agency, which speaks to your first question, right? Like, embrace what you can do and what we can do in partnership. And yes, I'm not saying that shouldn't necessarily be entertained, but I think we have to recognize the challenges of that, the legalities of that, and the ways in which, in the end, how does that ultimately get us to the objective that we seek? I think a mass mobilized movement of people out there from all different walks of life taking to the streets, figuring out ways to demonstrate that they are not going to continue down this path to authoritarianism is a lot more powerful when the people have literally woken up and said, enough is enough. And that's how change has happened, and how legal battles ultimately get resolved, is the energy of the people. The people have all this power. And to your first question, I would say, start in intimate ways. See, I think what I've learned from talking to folks across the state and the country, for that matter, about how we make change. You think back to even, in 2016, 2017, when you had all these indivisible groups pop up, and, those groups were starting off small groups that were kind of confined to their community or village or township, whatever the case might be. But then you looked up over time, and it was a whole network, a whole web of organizations that were able to plug in together and mass mobilize and collectively decide how to operate whenever it was warranted. Identify your intimate partners, the folks within your community that are building in their own ways on their own plot, and then figure out the connective tissue with that to a neighboring community, right? And figure out if that neighboring community is tied to another neighboring community. Figure out how to tie and stitch together all of your pieces. But first, identify your piece. Identify where you are in this equation and who your allies are. Get very comfortable in that space. So comfortable that you then can start figuring out, okay, where are the other ways to connect? And don't try to solve it all at once, because you're not going to be able to solve it all at once. What you're doing is building. You know, you're building a house. You build your brick by brick. If you stop every second and look at the brick and say, gosh, whew, how much more I got to go? You know, you might not want to keep building the bricks, right? But if you just focus on the brick building, you know, over time you look up, oh, wait, I actually built something here, right? And I think that's the mentality we have to have in this moment. And I think that's where leadership also matters. And I think, in conclusion, I think I can conclude now. Should I wrap it up? Let me say this in conclusion. First of all, I want to say thank you for coming again and for being so attentive and so engaging. I'm going to tell you something that I don't always say, but I'm responding to the energy. I could just feel it, so I'm just sharing. I don't have all the answers, okay? No one has all the answers for the moment that we're in right now. But what I do know is that moral clarity is an essential component of this moment. The convictions of our values, of our principles, that's what I know we have to hold on to. If we say being decent and being kind and being real and being honest and being compassionate matters, if we believe love really matters more than hate, if we believe these things, we have to build a movement around these values and be undogged in our commitment, or dogged in our commitment to seeing these things through. And I would just ask that as you think about how to lead yourselves and the kind of voices you want out there, understand that, listen for moral clarity, because that, I think, is what's going to cut through a lot of the political noise. Listen for the moral clarity. And I think one way to judge moral clarity isn't just words. Matter of fact, not words. It's the actions. The actions that are being taken. Are those actions about sacrifice? Are they about giving something up? Are they putting people or individuals in a position where they have to wrestle with their own power rather than consolidate it and hold on to it? These are the kind of questions we should be assessing with every single political actor, irrespective of party affiliation. Because Trump is compelling. Yeah, I said it. The reason why he's compelling is because he comes across uninhibited. He comes across unbeholden. And that's because he doesn't buy into reality. And we laugh because we want to cry, but it's the truth. He's delusional. He doesn't accept reality. So imagine being a political actor that doesn't accept reality. When you lose, you don't lose. When they tell you the job numbers are what they are, you say, nah, I'll just fire the guy that said that. Or when they tell you, actually, you didn't really destroy the nuclear facilities out in Iraq, nah, get rid of that guy too. Like, you don't accept reality. So if you don't accept reality, then you never are worried about self-preservation and survival. And then that comes across to the average person, New Yorker, American, that guy looks unbeholden, like, raw, free. And when you line him up against every other political actor who is playing the game of survival, self-preservation, who is trying to worry about his or her next position, it pales in comparison. No matter how morally bankrupt he may be, the political actor looks like an actor. And the only way to really beat back, in my opinion, the kind of energy that Trump is bringing is uninhibited conviction, uninhibited moral clarity. That's the only way. This is not a left-right fight. This is a right versus wrong fight, a love versus hate fight, a good versus evil fight. That's what this actually fundamentally is. And that's the fight that I'm prepared to fight with you. Thank you. I love everybody. God bless.
Thank you so much. Thank you to all the organizations who tabled today. Thank you to Dakota North for providing media coverage. Thank you to the beautiful Strand for hosting us. And for any of you who would like to come and actually shake Lieutenant Governor's hand, please stick around. And I just want to leave a final message to those people who can look to their left and to their right. I keep saying it on my posts, pay attention. Pay attention to the Democratic leaders that we need to hold accountable who are too afraid to come today. Thank you.